We have a crucial window to get people to pay attention to who Bill Gates really is and what he represents. Here's some websites, go post it on this site, reach out to friends, go to coffee shops, put up flyers, just do it, take action there.
You're listening to the Corbett Report.
Welcome, friends. James Corbett here at CorbettReport.com in a conversation that is being recorded on the 28th of July, 2020. And if you'll cast your mind back all the way back to the beginning of June, you'll remember that I was talking to today's guest, Derek Brose of The Conscious Resistance at theconsciousresistance.com about the Expose Bill Gates Global Day of Action. And if you don't remember that, I'll link that up in the show notes just in case you want to refresh yourself about that event. Well, it was successful, in case you didn't notice, and as a result, it's going to happen again, and again, and again, and again, and as many times as you out there want to make it happen. So to join us to talk about this idea, we're going to talk to, once again, Derek Brose of The Conscious Resistance. Derek, thanks for coming on once again.
Yeah, thank you, James, for having me back on to talk about this.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it. First of all, for people who may have not noticed, the first Expose Bill Gates Global Day of Action was a huge success, and it did make waves. In fact, many of the people who didn't even see our conversation may have heard about that through other social media and other places. Talk a little bit about the success that event had.
Yeah, I was not sure what to expect. We did the interview last time, and various other independent media were sort of promoting it, Jason Burmis and a few others, but it didn't have quite the amount of support going into it that I was hoping for, as far as just more bigger channels and just people speaking about it. But on the actual day, it took off on its own, and that was Saturday, June 13th, and it was trending throughout the day on Twitter. I don't know what the final number was, but I know we had well over 150,000 tweets from different parts of the world. We had people translating the material into French, Italian, there was Farsi at one point, Spanish, of course, and just so that was really cool to see. And then we did have some coverage from RT and I think a few other websites that at least reprinted what they wrote. And it acknowledged, the call to action. And of course, there was the labeling of conspiracy theorists and that sort of thing. But overall, it did get out there, and to the point where some people felt the need to try to hijack it and try to turn it into expose Bill Gates for being such a great philanthropist or whatever. But the point is, it was starting conversation, which is what we set out to do. The whole reason we had this original talk about it was because you have the awesome documentary series that's out. I've got my article, my 3-part series investigation. There's other people who've dug into who Gates is about. And of course, now he's reemerged from his parents' basement, and he's out in the last couple of days calling for more lockdowns and no school till 2021 and multiple doses of vaccines for everybody, and dismissing all these crazy conspiracy theories and everything. And so it felt like we should try to jump back into some of that success, because I did have people reach out after the fact who said, hey, I didn't even know this was going on. Is there a plan to do another one? I got enough of those emails that it felt like, yeah, maybe we should do something, and enough time has passed. We're almost 2 months since the last one. So it'll be, I think, the perfect time. And so we had good success the first time getting it trending. We had, I guess you could say, various minor right-wing and left-wing celebrities kind of getting in and promoting it as well, and posting it. And hopefully we can get more people involved this time.
Absolutely right. It's a big tent, and this is a decentralized, leaderless resistance movement. There's no one to look to for orders of what to do or what not to do. The real the meat and potatoes of what is going to happen is up to the people out there. And if nothing happens, if no one wants to do anything, well, that could happen too. But it really is up to everyone out there as to what they want to do or don't want to do with this idea. I say run with it. And if your question is, should I ... the answer is yes, you should. And if the question is there anyone out there who's going to ... the answer is no, there isn't, but you are now in charge of it. I officially give you the seal, the sheriff badge, to be the head chief, whatever, disseminator in whatever way you want with this information. So let's talk about some of the resources that people can use if they do want to spread information and help to expose Bill Gates. You mentioned your 3 articles. Obviously, I'll link to that. And of course, there's the Who is Bill Gates documentary that I did. But I notice on your site, you have a page dedicated to this day of action. It's called theconsciousresistance.com/Bill Gates. Expose Bill Gates monthly day of action, how to get involved. And it's just some basic information about this. At the bottom, you have a little 4-point bullet list of how to get involved. Let's go through some of these ideas that you have of what people can do with this this hashtag and how they can run with it.
Yeah, for sure. I want to add to what you just said, James, that it's absolutely a decentralized thing. And as you have, surely I get the emails of, hey, actually, I got one today. Is there anybody in this part of town that's organizing Expose Bill Gates Day? And I send them back, yeah, you are. We haven't heard from anybody. So I guess you're going to be the one to put it together. Here's some websites. Go post it on this site. Reach out to friends. Go to coffee shops. Put up flyers. Just do it. Take action there. But yeah, I tried to make it as simple, give people the basic information about what we're about. They can go watch your documentary. They can read my articles. There's plenty of other information now coming out about Bill Gates, Bill Gates and Epstein and all this whole thing that we were trying to expose, as well as the larger agenda that Gates represents. And so for me, the first thing is to host an event. I'm calling for people to host events publicly, whether that means going out into the real world, protesting, documentary screenings, banner drops, just handing out flyers. That's what I did in Houston in June. We had a small group of people, I think 7 to 10 people, and we just went to a public park where there was a lot of people out and passed out flyers and talked to them. And we actually found a lot of people who were receptive to the issue, including somebody who was a Black Lives Matter protester who is very much aware of Bill Gates' agenda. So that was interesting. So yeah, calling for people to get out to the streets in some way. And if that's not something you're able to do or interested in, really focusing, of course, social media. We have the hashtag Expose Bill Gates. I've had somebody also recommend, and I threw this in there, that we shouldn't forget about Melinda Gates and her role, because after all, it is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And there's a really awesome book. I'm trying to reach out to the author. It's called Africa, and she's an African woman who wrote about this and wrote about Melinda Gates' role in the African agenda with vaccines. And you've covered this, of course. So, we're using those hashtags: expose Bill Gates, expose Melinda Gates, expose the predator class, expose, technocracy. You can come up with your own as well. Obviously, we're focusing on that main one, but using the power of social media throughout that day. Maybe you schedule a couple of post one of James's parts of the documentary, the 4 parts, throughout the day, post my 3 articles, post some other videos, things like that. Send them in personal messages, email them to people. Those things go a lot longer of a way, I think, than just posting sometimes into the abyss of social media. If you reach out to a friend and say, hey, today's an important day to me. It's this Expose Bill Gates thing. Here's a couple articles I'd like you to read. Here's a short video, or here's a documentary. Let's watch this together. Hey, can we get together? And, there's different ways to do this. And so I was just trying to put some basic starting ideas for people who are looking for that.
Absolutely. And you cut out a little bit as you were saying the title of that book. It's Target Africa, Ideological Neocolonialism of the 21st Century. I am reading that book at this exact moment too. So there you go. Definitely something to check out. I'll throw that link in the show notes. And I think you're right. Again, hey, if you're on social media, if that's what you do, then go do it. I'm not going to tell you not to do it. But as you say, reaching out to people you actually know, either physically or through email or whatever, to directly contact them and tell them about this can be very much more effective than just sort of broadly giving it out to, into the social media sphere, which we know is censored and controlled anyway. And of course, the trending Twitter hashtag was squashed on Bill Gates, the original Bill Gates, the Global Day of Action. So don't expect that Twitter and companies like this are going to help us promote this type of idea, because of course they're not. But I very much like the idea of holding documentary screenings, because then, of course, you get people together in a room, they can talk and debate and be exposed to this information. They can exchange contact information and stay in touch. But they may be spreading this deadly killer virus if they do that. So, of course, it could adhere to all social distancing norms and conventions, and don't upset anyone. Yeah. Well, anyway, as I say, do it however you want. That's going to be in there. Yeah. Well, do it however you want.
I want to add to that, James. Yeah, I want to add real quick, James, sorry, that on the day of the action, too, you mentioned Twitter while you were talking about Twitter. I actually woke up that morning and for one reason, no explanation, my Twitter account that I don't even use that often was blocked out for the entire day of Expose Bill Gates. And, clearly, I think I got one tweet out using the hashtag, and then for the rest of the day until magically the next morning, it's like, oh, your account has been, let back in. You're back into the playground or whatever. But yeah, so we definitely can't rely on those platforms.
Definitely not. I think that is painfully obvious to everyone at this moment. I also want to make sure that people understand you also have some examples of flyers that people can print out that they can hand out that are there on that page. Of course, make your own, whatever. Again, this is spontaneous, it's decentralized, everyone's their own leader, but there are some example flyers there for download on your page as well. I'll throw in a link to a couple of videos that you've done on this recently, a more in-depth video where you go through that latest Bill Gates interview where, oh yeah, there are severe adverse reactions that are happening to the vaccine trials, and the people who are getting the high doses, it's almost every single person is having side effects. But, oh, don't worry, the FDA is the gold standard of regulatory agencies, and they're going to look into it, says Bill Gates, as he is actually somewhat pressed on the issue of vaccines. And aren't you invested in the companies that are going to be making money from this? Which he completely sidesteps. Anyway, you did a great breakdown of that, so I'll direct people to that. Also, you have a little 2-minute video that you can, everyone out there can help to spread around for the sort of low attention span normies in the audience who might need something a little bit more to the point. You have a little 2-minute trailer essentially for this Global Day of Action. We'll direct people to that. All of these links will be in the show notes. But as I say, this is leaderless. Do what you want, but here's some suggestions. And I think that's, again, we have to keep pressing this because it's not like this is over, and it's not like Bill Gates is going away. And yes, he is not the ringleader of all ringleaders, but he is the public face of this agenda. And the mainstream keeps turning back to Bill Gates. And what does Bill Gates think about this? And Gates, tell us more about these vaccines we're all going to have to take. So it is important to expose Bill Gates. Derek, any final thoughts on this before we leave people?
So just the final things I would say, of course, thanks, James, for continuing to spread this and for your work on this. It is every second Saturday beginning August 8th until the end of the new normal, as we're putting it, because many of us know new normal is now like new normal order, or the great that these language, the words they're putting out there, we understand the larger meaning of them. And the other thing, I did put 2 suggestions out there that I'll just wrap up with. And one is really, again, emphasizing start your event. Go out there and put an event together. This to favorite content creator, YouTuber, journalist, etc., to get involved in this in some way. Especially, like, let's hit across the spectrum. I really am trying to encourage this to be as nonpartisan as possible. And I know that there are people who are maybe more left-leaning who understand Bill Gates's, corporate malfeasance, and, the people maybe who are more right-leaning who are concerned about population control or whatever it may be. The point is, tweet at, email, comment to whatever your favorite content creator and ask them to use the hashtag #ExposeBillGates. Encourage them to make a short video about it and to add their voice to the choir on this. So thank you, James.
All right. Thank you, Derek, for the work that you're doing and for keeping this going. I think it is important work. So once again, we'll direct people to your website generally, theconsciousresistance.com, and all of the things we've talked about today. Derek, keep doing what you do and keep us informed about what's happening over on your side of the planet.
All right. Thank you, James.
Recently, Derek Bros put up an article on The Last American Vagabond that got a lot of attention. And it's 100% accurate in every possible way. And we're going to go through and show you why that is. We're going to show you the claims being made about it, claims people say are fake news or it's misleading. It's kind of interesting how that seems to be the same thing the mainstream media says. Weird how that's now being applied within the two-party paradigm, but I guess that's kind of always been there. But we're going to go over this topic today and show you why what happened in regard to Trump pulling out of the World Health Organization, but an action that happened before that, which is Trump endorsing Gavi, which nobody wanted to talk about at the time, which is a Gates-founded and predominantly funded organization for a vaccine alliance. And why the only point being made in this article is that's contradictory. And why right now we're seeing essentially a bait and switch, where we're saying, well, we're getting rid of this World Health Organization while all of his supporters are going, yay, because Gates, bad guy, and that's Gates' thing, even though Gates is the next leading supporter of World Health Organization, funding them the most after the United States, which means when Trump pulls away, it essentially gives him more control. But we'll get into all this as we go through it. But the only thing being said within this article is that this is contradictory. And we show you the incidences of how it's being funded. It doesn't mean that Trump's the only one in the world funding Gavi. It doesn't mean that this was happening at the exact same moment as it happened with who. All this is described in the article. But it's very important today to go through this topic because it's a really big deal. And it shows you that we are hopefully beginning to realize the two-party illusion. And we can see that all of them on any side of this fake two-party system are driving you in the same direction as they pretend to be fighting about it. One says, well, these masks aren't needed. One says they have to be. But it's weird how the mask mandates keep happening, even though it's an inherently unconstitutional thing. And any president would have the right to stand up and say, no, you can't do that. But that's not happening. It's the states and that's their thing. What a bad Democrat, right? Divide, divide, divide. Well, he's the president of the people of this country, not just of the Republicans. So when you attack the Democrats, you're attacking half of the people that you're supposed to be representing, even if they don't agree with you, even if you hate them, or even if they hate you, I should say. The point is is not to attack Trump, is to attack the idea of what this system is. The politics in this country, that is the political system that is off the rails, completely broken, non-existent in my opinion. It's an illusion. And that was what this was meant to do. That's going to be the main point today. There's many other things we're going to touch on that tie in with it. But it's very important that we see all this. And the last thing I want to say before I get into the article to start is that I hope everybody knows that every single piece of anything that touches the last American vagabond or comes on this show is vetted by myself, as well as the authors themselves, right? So we have Derek Brose, who's writing an article who he vets extensively. And I have the utmost faith and complete trust in in Derek's ability to research. That's not based on my opinion. It's based on his past actions. His research and his efforts and his due diligence is bar none. I mean, that's why I wanted to work with these people. So then it comes to me, and then I vet everything that comes through here. Every link, every claim, it all goes through me before it goes out there, as an editor should do. Okay, the point being, all of these things were passed through me. That doesn't mean that I couldn't have been wrong. But the point of coming in today is to reassert the reality of this and show you that I'm not going to just, fly with these kind of back away because people are challenging it. We need to understand that this is legitimate and this is important, and what's happening needs to show us the reality of the situation. So let's get right into it today to start off with the idea that Donald Trump officially withdraws from the World Health Organization. Okay. Now, right off the bat, everyone in his sphere assumes, see, this is the best thing ever. Now, I've always said that this is a defunct organization that's completely politicized. Interestingly enough, primarily by the United States government. But either way you look at it today, I think it's a good move, especially if you believe that Trump is fighting that entity to pull away from something like this. Okay. But the problem is, if you're alternatively funding other things that are basically the exact same agenda and idea, it's an illusion. It's a shell game meant to deceive the people who think they can support this one person, right? And whether that was a left or a right or a Democrat, it doesn't matter. This thing has been happening forever. This is the same tactics, the same ploys, the same tools they use. That's why you can go back and look 40 years ago and notice, hey, they're using the same narratives. It looks like they're using the same ploys. Didn't that past president say that speech that this person's saying today? Over and over and over, right? The only difference is people have convinced themselves that this one person is different today. And every year they do that. This is the most important election of your lifetime. This person's going to change everything. Obama, hope and change, going to ruin everything. But it's not ever happening until we change them. That's what has to happen. One person's not going to change anything. But so this comes out, everybody cheers. Okay. And the same day when this was announced, Derek put out an article that he was already working on. Vaccine bait and switch. As millions pulled from World Health Organization, Trump gives billions to Gates-founded Gavi. None of that's inaccurate. Okay, so I'm going to go over, before I get into the article, I want to go over the things being said, and we're going to go through this entirely. I want you guys to understand this article and why it's very important. Now, the right off the bat, first of all, the very first things we saw from this entire thing were fake news, not real. Right? Everyone, all the commenters from QAnon, Trump supporters, and even people on other sides are saying this isn't real, this is fake news. That was the reflexive response until we go and say, oh, well, here's him actually saying that, which, by the way, we played it on this show before, right? The fake news was that Trump endorsed Gavi. He'll never do that. That's a Gates thing, right? Well, as I already showed you, this was on June 4th. And to be clear, one of the arguments is trying to make it sound like we're deceiving people by making it sound like this was something that was... The article has the details, okay? Everything in that headline is completely factual. The article goes into explicit detail about when this happened, why it happened, and how the chain of events went forward, right? So people that want to read the headline and act like it's misleading, as opposed to the fact that it's real and accurate, and that article goes through all the details of why it's accurate, is just a choice. So again, we can show you this so you can watch it for yourself.
Gavi operates with great transparency, and Boris Johnson is somebody with tremendous respect. Gavi operates with great transparency, and Boris Johnson is somebody with tremendous respect for you and everything you do. He called, he said, you think you could do something maybe around the Oval Office or right by the Oval Office? I said, why not? It happens to be right behind me. As the coronavirus has shown, there are no borders. It doesn't discriminate. It's mean, it's nasty, but we're going to all take care of it together. It's great to be partnering with you. We will work hard. We will work strong. Send my regards to Boris, and good luck. Let's get the answer. Gavi operates with great transparency.
Forgot that they repeated. Now, I mean, first, we're going through this step by step, guys. There's a lot to this, okay? Now, as people in the chat are already saying, there's plenty of other examples, too. We're going to go into those after we get past the opening of how Trump is clearly tied to Gates and working with him in multiple ways, including Moncef Slaoui and on and on and on. Now, we're going to get to those. But I want to walk you through this as it developed because it's very important. Now, first of all, it's fake news, right? That was the claim. That didn't happen. He would never do that. And then, of course, there actually were some honest people online that when I showed them this clip, they go, wow, okay, wait a minute, I was wrong, right? And that's good. And I said, well, thank you for having a conversation about this, right? Okay, so he did have this conversation. He did endorse Gavi, which, by the way, should be, that's inherently contradictory to what they would say, but we're going to get into the nuance of the Q mind in this, and there's a 4D chess move happening here, even though there's no evidence to support that. It's a adult fantasy. But he did actually say this. Now, it says the U.S. aid echoes Trump's words, and this is just the tweet still, echoes his words, and is proud to be partnering with Gavi by committing $1.16 billion to protect people through vaccines. Now, we'll go through why it ends up being over $2 billion, but the point is, that's U.S. aid echoing him and saying that they're partnering with Gavi. That's the U.S. government. Okay. Now, the other argument is, well, that's U.S. aid. That's not Trump. Trump didn't do that. Well, the first thing to say is, let's not forget that this is the president. He's the leader of this country. Everything that happens when you're a real leader is your responsibility. Okay. So even if you want to pretend like he's not aware, which seems to, cast an interesting shadow on him about him just being unaware of what's going on around him. But I argue that's not the case. But even if you want to argue that, it is still his responsibility. 100%. So the argument would be that in the headline, it suggests that Trump did this and that's deceiving. Okay. Again, it is Trump, and I'll show you why. But just to address the first part, yes, it's U.S. aid. Okay. Here's the actual, and by the way, this is directly from the Gavi website where you can see this endorsement. Now, here is what Robert F. Kennedy posted. Now, at first, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. posted this article on his Instagram. And then after he got pressure from people who followed him, he responded to some of them. Clearly, you can see. Here's what he said. I did a deep dive. The money is going through aid, so U.S. aid. So I'm not comfortable with the accuracy of the headline. Okay. He says, I need to do more research tomorrow. I'm concerned that while technically accurate, it might be unfair. Very interesting. So he took it down. I'll be reposting a lengthier explanation tomorrow. Now, look, I'm not going to give him a hard time for for doing his due diligence. Even though it's after it was posted, it doesn't matter. He's being honest and saying, okay, well, I'm looking at it. I do feel it has to do with pressure from people, probably Trump supporters. But either way, I'm going to show you why that's not correct. And even in the title is correct, and I'll show you why. Okay, so first of all, I want you to understand that not very long ago, as it says right here, with control of U.S. aid now in the hands of the State Department, U.S. aid's work in development joins diplomacy and defense as one of three key pieces of the nation's foreign policy apparatus. Okay, so U.S. aid is under the control of the State Department. So in that, well, the State Department's not Trump, right? And we can always play this game. Is that only things that Trump does with his personal hands are his responsibility, and every other thing that happens in the government is somehow not his fault. But if it was Biden, it would be his fault, right? It's this game we play where we don't want to hold our own people accountable. First of all, the State Department is 100% that's Donald Trump, okay? That is Trump, that is Pompeo, these are the people we're talking about. That's their decision to do this, as U.S. aid is now in the hands of the State Department. But let's take that a step further, because as people are saying now, it's not him. He didn't do it. He doesn't control that, okay? It's not accurate. We can show you, first of all, that the president's budget itself for fiscal year 2021 included money for the State Department and U.S. aid, $41 billion. Now, that's not nefarious. It happens all the time. But you can recognize, one, that he is deciding and have an influence over their funding, okay? But it gets much bigger than that, okay? We know that, first of all, U.S. aid was subsequently established by an executive order by John F. Kennedy. The agency was declared and created by a president, and it says, as an official component of the U.S. foreign policy, U.S. aid operates subject to the guidelines of the president, Secretary of State, and National Security Council. Now, let's be clear, that is because of this. We're talking about that the U.S. aid is in the hands of the State Department, okay? So the bottom line is the U.S. foreign policy, U.S. aid operates subject to the guidance of the president. Okay, still, you could argue, well, the U.S. aid made the choice. He's responsible. The same way you can't pretend that Fauci did this. It's NIH, okay? U.S. government, Trump's administration. As a leader, he's responsible for all of this, but it gets even better. John Barsa, who is actually the acting head of U.S. aid at this moment. Guess who put him in place? Barca served on the Donald Trump transition team and later served as an assistant to then DHS Director John F. Kelly. Okay, but Donald Trump himself designated the current acting head of U.S. aid. Okay, so we get further into this. Oh, looks like they refreshed the article. I was just going to show you. It's just right here, as it says, Barca, the president identified John Barca, who currently serves as assistant administrator. Trump announced that he was appointing him. The change in leadership comes amid. You guys get the point. Trump's move to appoint the acting administrator allows Barca to take on a role quickly. Trump chose him. Now, let's just be clear. That doesn't necessarily translate to anything other than he picked this person and put him in the position. But what I'm trying to lay the groundwork for is that let's say this was a Democrat. Let's say this was anybody that they were fighting right now. Do you think that these connections to Gates would be just like, oh, well, that's nothing. That's not real. Any one of these things would say, well, of course, you see, they work with Gates, so they're a bad guy. You see, the point is the logic doesn't apply to both sides. When you can make, and look, I'm not arguing that I, as you know clearly, hopefully by now, that I think both sides of this ridiculous system are completely broken and completely corrupted. The Pelosi's, the Bidens, and the Trumps, and everybody else, they're all corrupted, in my opinion. So the point is, if we're going to apply the logic to say, here's where this person worked at one point in a group that was founded by Gates, and that means that they're now a Gates operative, which is what's happening today. Okay, and I'm not saying it doesn't mean that that means that they're not. Funding means something, but it does not mean that guaranteed. So when we do the same thing on the other side, and we have the fact that Trump actually appointed the person in the position, Trump is the one who picked him, the funding comes from the government, the presidents are the ones in control of this entity, and the State Department's the ones that actually are legitimately controlling them. Okay, when I'm to differentiate again, the point is that it is subject to the guidance of the president. Okay, but then it's also literally controlled by the State Department. Okay, the point is when you see all of this stuff, if this was applying to anyone other than Trump, it would mean they were a slam dunk Gates operative. Or, you don't even have to put it that way. It would mean, based on my argument today, that it very clearly shows a connection between U.S. aid and what they do and the influence of the president over that agency. And if that is then funding Gavi, which is a vaccine alliance to the tune of $2 billion, which I'll show you more when we read Derek's article. Really, actually, let's just say it's 1.6, or let's make sure I'm being completely accurate here in regard to the amount. There's so many billions of things flying around, 1.6, 1.4. We're going to get another one today that's in regard to, let's not to search back for it, billions of dollars. So they're giving them to Gavi. Right, through USA. There's also like a $400 million one and a $500 million one coming from the U.S. government, which I'll show you in a moment. But all of this is coming from the U.S. government and going to Gavi, which is the vaccine alliance, which is under the control of the president and the State Department. Okay, and even if you think that somehow is not connected, you also remember that Trump himself stood up, announced that we are supporting Gavi. We are supporting them. Okay, and that's when they followed up and said, yes, and we agree. And that's why we, the U.S. government, are committing $1.16 billion, right? Because the USA doesn't have control over this unless it comes from the higher powers. Okay, I don't know why this is so incredibly difficult for some people, and I get it. It's because you don't want to see what this means, or at least what it suggests. But it's very frustrating for people, even people like Robert F. Kennedy, to act like this is not accurate or unfair when it is simply the reality of the situation, to state very basically that this is what's happening. Oh, and again, to add one more point to this, for those that are acting like this is one simple thing, remember that Trump also appointed Big Pharma executive named Moncef Slaoui, who is also connected to Bill Gates, as the head of the vaccine developments. He is the vaccine czar. So how many things are you going to ignore before you pretend or before you realize what's really happening? I mean, you can only act so many times like this is a 4D chess move, or it's some kind of way to play everyone against each other with nothing but your hope. Until you just fall. I mean, what's going to happen is one day it's just going to be what we're telling you it is, and you won't be able to say it. You'll probably still have some excuse for why it's not what we're literally living in. Now, to be clear, because this is obviously directed at one side, it does not mean the same irrational mindset does not exist on the other side of the two-party paradigm. The point is we all need to see past this. Now, I'm going to go through this all the way. I want you to understand what this is saying, because there are still people right now sharing memes and talking about how this is fake news, which really doesn't matter because I'm hoping the intelligent people out there are willing to read it for themselves. But it's still frustrating. Now, the reason it's a bait and switch, so we're clear, is because we're talking about the funding flowing to the same direction, the funding flowing to the same agenda. Now, whether that happened the following day or he announced his funding or announced his backing of Gavi and the funding went to Gavi and then he pulled out of World Health Organization, what does it amount to? It amounts to the same thing. We're talking about funding the same agenda. It's a shell game, guys. Now, as it says, in mid-May, U.S. President Donald Trump announced that the U.S. would be ending their financial support for the World Health Organization. Now, by the way, remember that even right now, this funding goes on until the end of the year. I understand it. This doesn't even go into effect until next year, which is pretty interesting. Now, it says the move was lambasted in the mainstream media as an out-of-touch politician pulling funding from the vital global health organization, which I have to admit, as I said at the time, it just seems like an odd move. Like, there's no real obvious reason why this needs to happen in the moment. Now, as I said, I agree with this and I'm glad it's happening. But my point is politically, especially when he's still giving money to all kinds of other things that are very much tied in the same line of thought, why he did this, it just seems like he's giving them ammunition. It's just a lob. It's like, here, bat this down in my face. Right? He's removing the only thing that's fighting the pandemic, which is, I don't agree with, but the point is it's still what they're saying, and he knows that. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't do the right thing because it will hurt him politically. I actually am glad in this one case there's something being done that's right, even when it's unpopular, but I argue it's because that's not something it's not self-serving. I argue this is part of the overarching agenda. But to be clear, I'm constantly arguing that he should be standing up and fighting for your constitutional rights, which is the only thing that really comes down to, it's the really thing that only matters. But to pretend like it's somebody else's decision, it's not his game, he's not allowed to make the call, is just insulting. Especially as in every other aspect of his policy, foreign or otherwise, they don't care about mandates, they don't care about laws and rules and morals, they do whatever the hell they want. Except when it comes to your constitutional rights. Oh, then his hands are bound. Can't do it, right? Isn't that lovely? Only when it applies to you. Now it says, let us start by looking at the funding provided by the U.S. government to the World Health Organization in previous years. The latest numbers from the fiscal year 2018, now numbers, as he says, from the most recent years not available, which is always so odd to me that is the case, show an estimate of $281 million to the World Health Organization from the U.S. Now the reason he's laying this out, and also he says the records indicate that after the U.S. government, and it's important, that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, are the second and third. So think about this. So you're not funding the World Health Organization, yet you turn around and give money to Gavi, who is then funding the World Health Organization as the third leading funder. Please realize how this is an obvious deception. It says the U.S. defunding the World Health Organization actually tightens the technocrats' already firm grip on another global institution. Think about it, right? You could argue he's not aware of this, or this is something that they have a different opinion on, but this is clearly the reality. Bill Gates moves to number one, Gavi number two. And now they're basically the leading funding sources of the World Health Organization, which clearly has political clout around the world, as they're pushing in global vaccinations, global digital passports, contact tracing, all these things. So you have to realize that even if you think he's doing what you want him to do, what he's actually accomplishing is the opposite of what you guys are screaming for. Now it says this means when Donald Trump stated that the U.S. will no longer fund the World Health Organization, the Gates Foundation and Gavi stepped in the top roles. Now Gavi was founded and largely funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in 2000. Either way, Bill Gates is the top donor and will continue to expand his influence and dominance in global health policy. Now I just have to point out again how ridiculous it is that even the endorsement of Gavi is just excused as some kind of there must be some move that we don't see because I've convinced myself that he'll never do something like this, right? That's a childish mentality. It really is, because you're literally just grasping at some kind of thing, literally anything you can make up to justify an action that you know is not okay. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't hope that he does something right or that there is an answer behind it, but you don't say it like that. You don't say there's an answer. This is what's happening. You're all fake news because he wouldn't do this. That is irrational because you're pushing your opinion as fact because you're just too desperate to see what's really happening in front of you. Now, this is not meant to be an attack to the people out there that are very much still Trump supporters, but at the same time open to these different perspectives because there's a lot of these out there. And that mostly those are the people we're trying to reach, the people that can see through it, but are still holding on to the two-party illusion. Now, it says either way, Bill Gates is the top donor. That's what I said. As reported in part 2, which again, you guys should really make sure and read. As reported in part 2 of my Bill Gates investigation, in 2010, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation launched the Decade of Vaccines and called for a global vaccine action plan. Since that time, they've only grown their network and influence on people like World Health Organization, Gavi, and other organizations in order to shape public health policy in a way that reaps benefits for them. By the way, I just completely skipped over the reality. Hey, brand new website, right? I meant to say that and I just forgot. The brand new website's up today, everybody, so you guys can see it for yourself. It's a whole new look. It's hopefully better in every way. So I hope you guys will see that. There shouldn't be, if you see anything that looks weird or different or glitchy, let me know. But I think it looks great. Now, while Trump's supporters viewed the U.S. withdrawal from WHO financing as a win for nationalism or a black eye for the globalists, the truth is a bit more nuanced, as it tends to be. In early June, the Trump administration declared support for Gavi to the tune of $1.16 billion U.S. donation. Now, just to be clear, he's very clear about the reality that this was in June. Okay? That's important because that's one of the leading ideas that they're somehow suggesting, as if that even changes the reality of the situation, first of all, but like that we're trying to claim that this happened in conjunction with one another. Now, understand, I can see how you might want to take that perception from the title, but the title, when read with the information that's being presented, is completely true, right? That's what's happening. Now, it says Trump's support for Gavi came via the first ever virtual global vaccine summit. And this is the one we just played you. It says, at the summit, Gavi surpassed the goal of 7.4 and got actually 8.8 billion, securing commitments from most major nations around the world. So again, another one. No, we didn't suggest only Trump was doing this, but yes, I've seen that claim already spreading about why we're fake news. Now, Gavi even received a $5 million donation from the Rockefeller Foundation. So just keep piling on the obvious, the very things that we think we're supposed to be screaming about, and yet they're clearly working in the same vein, like funding the same projects. Let's try to, please explain how that is some 4D chess move. Right. And I'm actually going to get to one of the arguments about why they think that. Now, Gavi stated that the funding will go to routine immunization programs and will also help a public-private partnership play a major role in the rollout of a future COVID-19 vaccine. Right. That's the point. Now, more than 25 heads of state, 50 leaders of international agencies, NGOs, private industry attended the fundraising event. That says U.S. Security Secretary, Guterres, stated that the vaccines would not be enough and instead called for global solidarity to ensure that every person everywhere gets access to the vaccine. I actually don't even think I have this up today, but they've already been calling for a global reset. Right? They're openly calling for it. The UN and all these bodies are all saying we need to use this to globally reset. Oh, you mean exactly what we told you, what this was probably the plan? And they all said, you're a crazy conspiracy theory. That's not happening. And here we are, as they literally call for a global reset and reimagining of our world. It's just amazing to me that we can I'm not saying that we have like a foggy version of it. We straight up exactly said that's what will happen. And here we are. And yet we're still crazy conspiracy theorists. Do you not realize how incredible that is? But you know what? Not just because it's this channel, but literally pat yourselves on the back right now for being one of the people that are smart enough to see that illusion. Because it's so ridiculous to me that we can't see that. Some of us. Now, Guterres also noted that our individual health depends on our collective health. Oh, there it is. None of us are safe until all of us are safe. Right? You're either with us or you're against us. It's the same old thing on repeat, right? Now, it was at this global vaccine summit where a pre-recorded message from Trump, which you already saw, was played. During the speech, he said very clearly, it is great to be partnering with you. Okay, so he is partnering with Gavi, Trump, his administration, and USAID, and giving them $1.16 billion, which the president is control of. So, I'm not seeing what is fake about this. Trump also called COVID-19 mean and nasty. Trump's support for Gavi was echoed on the Twitter account for the United States, which a U.S. aid agency, which I already showed you. Now, it was actually U.S. aid who first announced the pledge in February. Trump administration included that 1.16 commitment as part of the budget for fiscal years of 2020 to 2023, right? That seems pretty clear about all the details and how it actually came to pass. No one anywhere in this is claiming that Trump walked up with an envelope and handed it to Bill Gates. That's ridiculous. And that's exactly why the article itself walks through the real information. The budget for fiscal year 2021 included $290 million for Gavi. Remember that the records from fiscal year 2018 show an estimated $281 million to the WHO from the United States. Trump's administration announced an announcement of an initial $290 million investment, and that easily surpassed the U.S. investment in the WHO. And over the next 3 years, the U.S. will give more than $800 million to Gavi for their vaccination programs. That's just over the next 3 years. Now, this puts Bill Gates and his organization at the top of the global health pyramid, as he says. So what did Mr. Gates have to say about the success of the Global Vaccine Summit? He said, since its inception, Gavi has helped vaccinate more than 750 million children. And now it's stepping up and saying it's willing to deliver a COVID-19 vaccine as soon as one is available to end the pandemic as soon as possible. We must also renew our commitment to delivering every life-saving vaccine there is to every child on Earth. Well, that sure sounds safe. Now recognize again, this is the part I was hoping I didn't miss it. So it's the Trump administration's support for the development of vaccines to fight COVID-19 is also visible in a more recent virtual event organized by Global Citizen and the European Commission. June 27th, Global Citizen hosted the Global Goal, Unite for Our Future, the concert, which was supported by Bloomberg Philanthropies, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Wellcome Trust, corporate partners, Citi, Procter & Gamble, SAP, Verizon, Vodafone, the usuals. Once again, the funds raised at the event went to the Gates-founded Gavi. During that event, Kelly Craft, United States Ambassador to the United Nations, announced the U.S. commitment of $545 million to Gavi towards COVID-19 relief. So let me ask you this. Does that not constitute a direct money sent from the administration to Gavi? But let's just pretend like that's just not there because it's all fake news, right? Okay, so that's one more. So now we're now at 1.7-ish, $1.6 billion. As a May 2020 virtual summit, also organized by the European Commission, the Trump administration committed to giving another $775 million in emergency health, humanitarian, economic, and development aid for governments, international organizations, and charities fighting the pandemic. At this same event, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation contributed $125 million. Hey, these are the same summits we're talking about for Gavi towards COVID-19 efforts. Okay, so look, if you're even at the argument that this wasn't directly from the Trump administration, it still doesn't hold water. But that's not even the argument I'm trying to make. I'm not trying to literally say it came from Trump's hands. What I'm trying to say is that this administration is doing it, is taking an action that is 100% contradictory to, one, what they think he accomplished with leaving the World Health Organization, and two, contradicts literally everything that his supporters believe that he's fighting right now. And I'm hoping that will break through to them to show them that that doesn't mean that I believe he's a part of the problem, but that doesn't mean that's the case. It could also just mean that he's been threatened. It could mean that he's being fooled or tricked or deceived by somebody. It could be that he thinks he's doing the right thing and it's wrong. Now, I'm only giving you that out because I want people to get past it and see the reality. I don't care why you think it. Just realize the two-party system is broken. It was never meant to work. It's always been broken. And it's the deceptive tool to keep you lost in fighting each other. That's what I'm hoping this will accomplish. Now, at the end of the point is that either way, Gates wins. Taken together, the May payment of $775 million, the early June announcement of $1.16 billion, and the late June gift of $545 million, these taxpayer-funded investments will provide abundant resources for Gavi and subsequently the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. These funds easily outweigh the paltry $281 million the U.S. was giving to the World Health Organization. That is what it boils down to. Right there, guys. It's not hard to miss. Even if you think he didn't realize, or even if you think that's not what he tried to do, that's what on paper it comes down to. And I'm really just hoping that we can see that. Now, understand, taxpayer dollars. Okay, so even those that are thinking this is some kind of a ploy and he's doing this because he's trying to play them against each other, you're still giving your tax dollars to support the production and the agenda around these vaccines. And you have to live with that. And I also thought about this today. What if you believe that Donald Trump is doing this and secretly fighting them and somehow doesn't succeed, right? So you set the stage for them because you're playing 4D chess, and then somehow you don't accomplish the final move. Then all of a sudden, Congress votes in all of these bills and mandatory vaccinations and mandatory masks, and suddenly, even when he was actually trying to fight them, that didn't work, and now we're stuck with it. I mean, I don't for a second think that's what's happening, but realize even in a situation where you think he's doing what you think he is, if you're setting the stage for them in a very weird, surreptitious way to make them think that you're with them, it's very possible that that could just end up being the way it goes, especially if he fails. I'm bending over backwards to try to make this make sense for anybody to see the reality. He says it's important to understand that the World Health Organization is a part of the United Nations, which itself is an intergovernmental organization that is attempting to replace nation states as we know them today in favor of global governance schemes. Now, interestingly enough, Trump being one of the leading, at least at the time, driving this idea of nationalism, of America first, right? Of not the opposite of globalism, right? Except that everything he has led and done is leading that direction. Everything, all of it, all of the agendas, all of the wars, all of the invasions, all of the bombings, all of the burnings of wheat crops and occupations of wheat oil fields and coups in Bolivia, wherever, all of it is leading towards the globalist agenda. You may pretend like those moves are some kind of a way he's playing against them. It doesn't matter. You're still pushing their agenda in their chosen direction. That is what's happening. Now it says Gavi is a public-private partnership, which these are very alarming situations that have become this push for what we all need, right? The blending of government with so fascism, right? We want fascism because that helps us succeed. It's just ridiculous. The idea of a government being blended in with with a corporation, or the idea of corporate entities and the government being indistinguishable, that's a tenet of fascism. So this idea of public-private partnerships for our, technological advancement is it's a way to lead you by the nose into exactly the kind of society they want to build around you. Now, I'm not saying that there is not some not reasons where public-private partnerships are not beneficial in some ways, but I want governments to be out of the picture. That's the problem. I'm sure you can see that running theme with my mentality here. But it says where governmental bodies and private organizations partner up to provide some sort of public service. Neither of these organizations has been elected by the people, the free people of the nations in which they operate. But don't worry, it's for your good. We're doing it for you, right? Isn't that always the mantra? Despite this fact, the Trump administration is continuing to give billions to Gavi, and in doing so, furthering Bill Gates' goal to vaccinate 7 billion people. Now, another argument is that this is something that was mandated by Congress or decided by Congress. Now, understand that there is some level of accuracy to that, but not in the sense of, well, look, we go back to this point right here. Okay, this is what we're talking about. This budget, which is, yes, voted on by Congress, but this doesn't change the fact this is how our government operates. So if you're gonna equivocate about every choice that's made and break it down to the individual pieces, you will never hold the president accountable. I mean, literally ever, unless he makes an executive order. And that is probably the point here. It used to be a time when we acknowledged that true leaders took responsibility for their subordinates, or whatever you want to call it, right? If you're a leader of an organization, right down to the person mopping the floors, you are responsible for his job. You're responsible for how well it is. If someone slips and breaks their neck, do you go, oh, well, then you got to sue that mopping guy? No, they're going to sue you because you're in charge. The same thing applies, but we play this political game where that's just not the way it works because I don't like it. Hopefully, we're seeing through that today. Now, Trump may have pulled funds from the World Health Organization, but that decision allows Gates to take full control of World Health Organization policy, right? Which has a very, very strong influence over the direction of our COVID policy, which is the whole damn point, guys. Now, it says, and continue to use U.S. taxpayer dollars to fund vaccine projects. Again, it's exactly what I'm saying, including a rushed vaccine for COVID-19. This was likely the plan the whole time, right? Problem, reaction, solution. And when you just gobble up the comments made by your chosen leader, your chosen gospel, savior, well, then that's probably the plan, to get you to walk along right with them. And ultimately the same thing happens either way. As we have clearly demonstrated in previous reports, he says Gates has an outsized influence on the COVID-19 recovery, right? And global health in general. A 2015 report titled Philanthropic Power and Development, Who Shapes the Agenda, examines the influence of global philanthropy and provides examples of the undue influence Gates and others can wield. I mean, this isn't new. People have been screaming about this very alarming development for decades. Whether it's just philanthropy or NGOs, but this is they have convinced us that these altruistic entities are now literally. Well, let's just put it this way: those altruistic entities they've convinced people are altruistic are in fact the vehicles of war, the vehicles of regime change, the vehicles of subjugation and theft. That's what all these things are. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't real NGOs or aren't real philanthropic entities, but excuse me. But these people are abusing those, just like historically people have abused the idea of religion, abused the idea of government, abused the idea of anything that you feel you can trust. It seems pretty basic to me, but I get people have been socially engineered for decades, if not longer. Now, the report noted that researchers have been critical of Gavi for following the Gates approach. I mean, think about what this says right here. This report from 2015 says that the researchers are critical of Gavi as an organization because they follow a, quote, Gates approach on global health, quote, focusing on disease-specific vertical health interventions through, vaccines, instead of horizontal and holistic approaches, like strengthening your body to not have to take the vaccines or to not be susceptible to the very things you need a vaccine or they tell you need a vaccine to fight. Yeah, because we don't want that, right? Because there's no money in curing people. Healing people kills return business. That's the meme that's on my webpage right now, right? That's what doctors are taught. And that's actually what honest doctors will actually tell you in videos where they're being honest about what they're taught in medical schools, right? This is about, what do you have? Here's the pill for that. Right now, we need holistic approaches. We need to strengthen our bodies, not to just pump more chemicals and nanotechnology into them. But that's what's happening. The Gates approach through Gavi, which the U.S. government is completely behind now, is driving that bus. Further, in May 2019, Gavi CEO Seth Berkley referred to anti-vaccine sentiment as a disease. Right? So 4D chess or not, you're funding that. That needs to be censored from the internet. So now you don't even have a right to say those things based on a person that is the CEO of Gavi. I just don't see how you can spin this. Berkeley's statements are perfectly in line with Bill Gates' vision and larger agenda of eugenics. The public cannot be allowed to question the safety of vaccines, no matter how rushed they are, or if they're experimental, if they've never been tested, or if they've never even succeeded before, right? But sure, you don't get to question it. You don't get to question the legitimacy of your authoritarian technocratic dictators, right? You don't get that. But you're free, though. Keep saying it. You're free. I'm free. This is why the Trump administration appoints a big pharma lackey to head Operation Warp Speed. Trump's plan, which was to fast-track the development of vaccines for COVID-19. Again, that's a really risky 4D chess move if that's what you think it is. In May, Trump appointed Moncef Slaoui, a former executive with vaccine maker GlaxoSmithKline, to serve in a volunteer position assisted by Army General Gustave Perna, to the commander of the United States Army Material Command. By the way, I found this really interesting. I was like, did you misspell material? And I looked it up, and no, that's what the Army uses as their word for material, at least as it applies to this command structure. I just thought to myself, how ridiculous. Can't you just put an A in there and make it the real word? No, the Army has their own version of material. And maybe there's an explanation for that, but I just thought it was humorous. But if you look it up, the Army Material Command, spelled with an E, and you look up the word, even under the Army's term, it's the Army's word for material. I just thought that was so stupid. That's a perfect microcosm of what the Army is, what our government is. But it says, according to the Trump administration, Operation Warp Speed program is focusing on 4 vaccines with the hopes of testing and producing 100 million doses by October 2020, 200 million by December, 300 million by January, right? So yeah, enough to, vaccinate the whole country over. Right. Okay. So we shouldn't be afraid of that. even because he didn't tell you it was going to be mandatory, even as they're rolling out all of the things that make this thing essentially mandatory, all of the contact tracing and all of the digital passports, right? The things that we know, and I'm going to get to in a moment, are working right now. They're actually in the process of. Same argument. Billions of dollars invested in this, but we're going to pretend like it won't work. And they'll tell you it won't work unless we get mass adoption, but we're going to pretend like they're just going to leave it up to you. Now it says, once again, fingerprints are all over the situation. Salawi himself has a long history with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, sitting on the boards of companies that are connected to the organization itself. But let's pretend like none of this matters, right? None of this matters, as we literally know that the State Department is in control of the U.S. aid, which is funding Gavi, which we know that is budgets created by the president, which is obvious information, which is operating subject to the guidance of the president, and the literal person running the entire organization was somebody who was on his transition team and who he appointed himself. Pretty interesting, wouldn't you say? Now, right out, just those things I think are pretty damn clear. Now, am I crazy? I think that seems pretty damn obvious. And I think that this point is an important one, right? What we're talking about is a very big deal, not because it applies to Trump alone, because it applies to the government. What the real issue that we should be dealing with today. Now, I want to go over quickly before we go on to some of the topics, some of the arguments. Now, as always, I'm not trying to disparage, which I shouldn't say as always. There are times when my goal is to call somebody out because they do something I think is ridiculous. They attack me. But this isn't meant to necessarily call this person out. What I'm trying to point out is this is the kind of logic we're getting in regard to the response to this, as opposed to saying, okay, wow, well, I have to look into this because I don't believe that, or I don't want it to be true, and I don't believe he would do that. But no. First, as I said, remember, it was fake news. Not even true, which then morphed into, oh, but wait, I guess it's real, but here's why that doesn't apply. Okay, so if it was fake first, without due diligence, are we going to trust their second assessment? Probably not a good idea, right? But if it's not fake news, and even they realize that, that's why the new argument is that it's just misleading. Well, it's not totally accurate because it's, and here we'll show you why. He says, no, it's a good thing, apparently. He's doing this to play Bill Gates and the WHO against each other. Hashtag QAnons. Think about that. The idea, there's nothing that backs that up. So what you're doing is you're projecting your chosen and preferred intentions on the action without anything to back it up. That's called that's an adult fairy tale. That's your imagination, right? You're choosing to pretend that he has intentions that you don't know and you could never prove. Just because some post somewhere says something that we believe this, Q says this, doesn't mean anything. There's nothing to back it up. To play them against each other by funding their organizations doesn't make sense. But yeah, I guess we'll just have to wait and see, which seems to be the mantra. Trust the plan, wait and see, because then we'll be able to take action once it's already here. Yes, totally lines up. It's blind faith that this is not what we're saying it is. And that is incredibly dangerous. I'm always willing to accept that I could be wrong. Seemingly the other side just simply can't do that in regard to this specific argument, right? Because there's always plenty of sides. But then we take one step forward to right now, where the 7th Operation Warp Speed, which is Donald Trump's administration, the title for their, rapid escalation of vaccine production, which is totally safe. Not at all. In fact, it's very dangerous. In fact, it's everything about this is the opposite of what safety would entail. I mean, everything from the proper safety precautions, from anything, even including the fact that they've never even used this on people and they've never even made one successfully. But somehow, magically, they were able to do it this time. Wonder why. Right? Decades they've been trying to do this exact thing and failing over and over and over. And now suddenly it worked. Hey, what do you know? Well, just what a coincidence. But guess what? Operation Warp Speed gave Novavax $1.6 billion for a COVID vaccine. Right? But let's pretend like this is all 4D chess and these things aren't coming your way.
We're taking things that are, genetically modified organisms and we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot them right into the vein. We're taking things that are
genetically modified organisms.
And we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot them right into the vein.
Well, I just realized that today is Expose Bill Gates Day. As a matter of fact, Expose Bill Gates was trending all day on Twitter. In other news, Mrs. Melinda Gates responded to a question from a Time magazine journalist who asked who needs a potential CV-19 vaccine after healthcare workers. She replied, quote, "In the US, that would be black people next, quite honestly, and many other people of color. They're having disproportionate effects from CV-19. From there, people with underlying health conditions, and then people who are older. Those are the ones who all need it first." Now, just in case you didn't know, there's a name for test subjects who are the first to get unproven medication. And I'll leave it up to you to come up with that word, because YouTube censorship police won't allow me to do it here on my channel. Not without taking me down. It's already been reported many times on fake stream media that Big Pharma and Gates want to test their fast-tracked, subsidized chemical concoction on a certain demographic of people. And this just confirms that. Now let me ask you a question. Do you support Gil Bates and his global agenda to get over 7 billion doses of his DNA-altering, biometric database material into the veins of every man, woman, and child on the planet? Do you support the Gates-founded and funded Global Vaccine Alliance, the organization that's working closely with ID 2020? Global Vaccine Alliance, by the way, is called Gavi. How about the people who support Gates and Gavi? Do you support them? Yes? No? If you don't support Bill Gates' organization called Gavi, and you don't support those who support Gavi, before I play this clip, I just want to ask you one more time. Are you sure you don't? Check out exactly who supports Gates and the Global Vaccine Initiative.
Gavi operates with great transparency, and Boris Johnson is somebody with tremendous respect for you and everything you do. He called, he said, "Do you think you could do something maybe around the Oval Office or right by the Oval Office?" I said, "Why not?" It happens to be right behind me. As the coronavirus has shown, there are no borders. It doesn't discriminate. It's mean, it's nasty, but we're going to all take care of it together. It's great to be partnering with you. We will work hard. We will work strong. Send my regards to Boris, and good luck. Let's get the answer.
If you support Trump, you are, by extension, supporting someone who supports Gates and Gavi and the push to get the global vaccine into every single human being on Earth. So my question is, will you stay in your left versus right cognitive dissonance as you support the destruction of humanity through Trump or any left or right political puppet? Or will you finally take a whiff of the smelling salts of reality and join the struggle for liberty? Leave your thoughts about this. And if you still support Trump, knowing that he supports Gates and Gavi, I'd like to hear your rationale for that position.
Hey everyone, this is Derek Bros of the Conscious Resistance Network, and today we are going to be talking about a recent press conference from just yesterday. I'm doing this on a Wednesday. This press conference was on Tuesday that Donald Trump held. We're going to be talking about some of his arrangements with the vaccine crowd, with the pharmaceutical industry. We're going to be talking about a new announcement related to vaccines coming to the United States. 600 million doses in the United States that are coming. All of that and more. But first, I want to remind you guys to bookmark my website, theconsciousresistance.com, which is a home where you can find all of my content. You can download my books for free. I've written 5 books over the last 5 or so years. I have a new book coming out later this year. You can download those all for free. You can also check out my documentaries that I've produced, and you can watch those for free. If you want to purchase them, you can do so as well. And finally, just remind you guys to follow us on Float, follow us on Minds, follow us on Hive. Join our text list, guys. I just sent out a text a moment ago, so everybody who's on that, you got the text letting you know I'm live right now. And if you want to get our videos and you don't want to rely on YouTube, which you shouldn't, please follow us at BitChute or Library. My preference is Library or Float, but you choose where you want to go. And if you want to support me, you can do so at patreon.com/DerekBros. Finally, I have a Telegram channel for those of you who are on Telegram. I post way more content than I share via video and article. And if you want to see what I'm reading throughout the days, then please check that out. So first off, though, let's go ahead and recap a little bit. You guys know that I did an article and a video about a week and a half ago, and it was actually quite controversial, I would say. It caused some ruckus because my article started spreading. People like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. shared it, and then he took down his Instagram post. He retracted it, I guess you could say, because he believed that he was sharing something that was not factual, but in fact, it is factual. And this is the article I wrote for The Last American Vagabond, Vaccine Bait and Switch. As millions pulled from the World Health Organization, Trump administration gives billions to Gates-founded and funded Gavi, the Global Vaccine Alliance. And if you haven't seen that, that is on the front page of our website, or you can go to The Last American Vagabond. And I cover just too much to rehash here, but the connections are clear with the Trump administration and with Gates at this point. And then, of course, we have the fact that Trump has appointed Moncef Slaoui to the head of Operation Warp Speed. That was back in May. And of course, Slaoui is a former executive with vaccine manufacturer GlaxoSmithKline. And again, this is part of Operation Warp Speed, where they said they were hoping of testing and producing 100 million doses of vaccines by October 2020, 200 million by December, and then 300 million doses by January. And if you add that up, guys, that's 100 million, 200 million, 300, that's 600 million, which is what we're hearing about today. There's some new news on that we're going to get into. But that's where we've been. And even with that, some people are still making excuses. I heard all kinds of excuses with this article and this video. I had to do an additional video in defense of my Gates Trump article just to break it down further. I'm not going to do that today. Instead, we're going to hop over here. This is Donald Trump's press conference just yesterday, July 21st, 2020. This is not fake news. This is in the man in his own words. And we have 3 little quick sections we're going to listen to. So check these out, and I'm going to play you 3 different sections. And hopefully you can hear it all right. I'll be right back. You guys couldn't hear that, could you? I forgot to share the sound. Let me do that again. Apologies for that. This is something I often forget to do with this program. All right, we're going to go back, share audio. Let's try that a second time. All right, so we're going to go over here to 6 minutes. I don't know why that is freaking out. Nobody's having a seizure. I have it written down, 6:50. So we'll go here to 6:50. Apologize for the lack of sound. Let me get this right there. Here you go.
Everybody, that when you are not able to socially distance, wear a mask, get a mask. Whether you like the mask or not, they have an impact, they'll have an effect, and we need everything we can get. Data shows children have the lowest fatality risk. 99.96% of all virus fatalities are in adults. Think of that. Aware of this disease, we understand the disease to a large extent. Nobody's going to maybe ever fully understand it, but we'll end up with a cure, we'll end up with therapeutics, we'll end up with a vaccine very soon, all 3. We're instead asking Americans to use masks, socially distance, and employ vigorous hygiene. Wash your hands every chance to end it. We want to get rid of it as soon as we can. That is why getting a vaccine remains a top priority. 2 vaccine candidates are entering the final stage of clinical trials this month. This was achieved in record time. It used to be years before you were in a position like we are right now. 4 other vaccines will enter final trials in the following weeks, and we're mass producing all of the top candidates so that the first approved vaccine will be available immediately. And logistically, we have the military ready to go. We have great people, logistic military people, a wonderful general who's waiting for the vaccine so they can distribute it in record time. That's what's going to happen. So our military is all set to go. We will deliver a vaccine, therapeutics, whatever it is necessary, and defeat the virus once and for all.
We will defeat the virus once and for all. So I think you guys could hear that, right? Sorry for the first time, but just in case you couldn't, well, first off here, I'll post you guys the video. So I know there's going to be somebody, it's fake news. There's a link to the video. And here is here's the actual words Trump said. because I typed it up. I went through the trouble of listening to Trump and type it up. So here's the first part about the mask. We're asking everybody that when you're not able to socially distance, wear a mask, get a mask, whether you like the mask or not, they have an impact. They'll have an effect, and we need everything we can get. Then when he comes to the vaccines, he has two separate statements. The vaccines are coming, and they're coming a lot sooner than anyone thought possible, by years. If you look at the old system and look at the new system, I think by years. The China virus is a vicious and dangerous illness, but we've learned a great deal about it, and ultimately our goal is not merely to manage the pandemic, but to end it. And then the last part, we want to get rid of it as soon as we can. That is why getting a vaccine remains a top priority too. Vaccine candidates are entering the final stage of clinical trials this month. This was achieved in record time. It used to be years before you were in a position like we are right now for other vaccines. We'll lead to final trials in the following weeks, and we're mass producing all the top candidates so that the first approved vaccine will be available immediately. And logistically, we have the military ready to go. We have great people, logistic military people, a wonderful general who's waiting for the vaccine so they can distribute it in record time. That's what's going to happen. So our military is all set to go. We will deliver a vaccine, therapeutics, whatever it is necessary to defeat the virus once and for all. Now, I know there are some folks who say, oh, but he said therapeutics. That means that not all of us are going to have to take the vaccine. Guess what, guys? If you actually know what a therapeutic is, I mean, it can be a range of things, but if you know what it is in this context, many of you have heard about Moderna and their mRNA vaccine, which is a DNA vaccine that actually goes into your cells and affects you on the genetic level, which, by the way, has never been tested, and especially not in the amount of time that we're seeing right now. Well, Moderna also produces therapeutics. And you know what they consider to be a therapeutic? That little patch that we saw that Bill Gates was talking about, that little patch, or whatever you want to call it. It's not a chip, but it's some sort of patch that has your vaccine status. That's considered a therapeutics. So just as an example, therapeutic doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to get, out of the whole situation, that there's not going to be any, crazy shit going on. But let me continue on. The other news of the day, Trump made that statement yesterday, and then look where we're at today. Now we have the breaking news: the U.S. government agrees to pay Pfizer and BioNTech $1.95 billion for 100 million doses of a COVID-19 vaccine. Now, you got to remember this, guys. When they say the U.S. government agrees to pay something, that means you agreed to pay something, except for you didn't get a choice, because the government doesn't produce anything. They don't have any of their own money. All they have is stolen money from taxpayers. And we can open up the article here, go a little further. U.S. orders up to 600 million doses of Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. This is just today, breaking news. And signing a $2 billion deal to supply their experimental coronavirus vaccine, Pfizer Inc. and BioNTech are setting up a price ceiling of less than $20 a dose that will impact how much other companies charge to protect people from COVID-19. And they say governments worldwide are seeking to blunt a pandemic that's killed more than 600,000 people. They say it's going to be free, but again, free, but then there's a price tag attached to it that the American people are paying. So that's about $20 per vaccine that's going to come out of your pocket, whether you want to take it or not. And remember, for those who aren't aware, Pfizer, let's just take a little look at Pfizer. I can post all these links. This is from drugwatch.com. Here's just a rundown of Pfizer lawsuits and settlements. Pfizer set a record for the largest healthcare fraud settlement and the largest criminal fine of any kind with $2.3 billion in 2009. We can go into all these: the Protonix lawsuit, Primpro, Chantix, Depo Testosterone, Effexor, Zoloft, Eliquis, Lipitor, various drug recalls from Pfizer. Here's another one from business-humanrights.org. In 2001, a group of Nigerian minors and their guardians sued Pfizer in court, alleging that the company violated customary international law by administering an experimental drug to Nigerian minors. In 2011, the parties announced that they had reached a settlement in the lawsuit. Then we can go on. There's U.S. lawsuits. There's that Nigerian case. I found another one here. This is at core-research.org, the Corporate Research Project. And this is on Pfizer. And you can go here and learn more about their product safety, the pricing, and again, the history of scandals that they've had, bribery and improper payments.
In 1971, the EPA asked Pfizer to end its longtime practice of dumping industrial waste from its plant in Groton, Connecticut, in the Long Island Sound. The company was reported to be disposing of about 1 million gallons of waste each year by that method. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So that's from 1971 all the way up till the 2000s, mid-2000s. Human rights violations, accusations, labor violations, worker safeties, and then, of course, taxes and subsidies. And for those of you who hate the Clintons, there's some stuff going on in the Clinton administration. If you want to go back, I will post the links to all this. This is the Corporate Research Project, business-human rights, and then drugwatch.com. And then when you go to BioNTech, here is BioNTech announces, this is just September 2019, before we were even thinking about COVID-19, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation invested $55 million into an infectious disease collaboration that could reach up to $100 million. So Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation partnered with BioNTech just last September, and now they are one of the companies that are being announced as bringing the 600 million doses of COVID vaccine to the United States. I will post all these links in the chat. For those of you who are watching this afterwards, the links are in the chat. I will post them in the description of the video. I'll get a moment, but let me just share these all with you real quick. And what do you guys think about this? I mean, is there any denying at this point that the Trump administration is pushing this? I mean, I know my audience is a mix of people, some people who are in favor of vaccines, others who are very skeptical of vaccines, of course. And there are folks who, for one reason or another, still trust Donald Trump and believe that, somehow he was going to stand up against them. But my friends, there is no hope in government. I hope many of you will see that. I hope you don't think I'm just saying, well, the answer is Joe Biden or some crap like that. And I'm sorry, but the answer isn't even the third parties, because this system is inherently flawed. The system is inherently corrupt, and it's built that way. It's working exactly the way it's supposed to, which is keeping you and people like myself from being able to have a voice. And instead, the billionaire class, the predator class, are able to continue to rule over our lives. And it's going to come down to this point. I mean, I'll probably do a separate video on this, but you guys probably saw the story recently, the Kentucky couple that didn't want to do the quarantine orders, and now they have them on ankle monitors, and if they leave their home more than 100 feet, the cops will show up. We've got tests being exposed. I just put out a new article today, if you haven't seen it, called 5 Reasons Your Friends Mistrust COVID-19 Numbers. So we got people mistrusting the numbers. There's still people questioning the efficacy of the masks. We've got people being locked down for not wanting to be quarantined and isolated. We've got more places like Florida and other states who already have on the books emergency executive orders, which will allow them to force vaccinate you if and when it comes down to that. You've got this new deal for 600 billion doses of vaccines to come to the United States by the fall. Guys, this is why I've been really emphasizing this to you. If we trust them on their word, and if they are accurate with Operation Warp Speed, they have said that by October, the first 100 million doses will arrive. Then by December, another 200 million doses will arrive. And then by January, another 300 million doses. That is the 600 million doses that they are talking about with Pfizer and with BioNTech. So think about it. We are here on July 22nd, 2020, August, September. October is only 2 months and a week away. That means the first 100 million doses, if their timeline is correct, will be here in less than 3 months, my friends. And that means in 6 months, the 400 billion doses will be here. And that means in 7 months, 600 billion doses of vaccines in the United States will be here. And just by the way, U.S. population, what's the total U.S. population right now? According to some estimates, according to the 2010 census, there's only 308 million people in the United States. So why the hell do we need 600 billion doses? I'm not sure, especially because we know that according to some polls, as high as 50% or 1/3 of people, somewhere in that range, 33% to 50% of people are not interested in this vaccine. So where are those 600 billion doses going to go? What are they going to do with it? And do you think they're going to spend the time and the money to do it and then just allow you to say no? Well, maybe they'll let you say no, but then your kids won't be able to go to school anymore. You won't be able to work. You won't be able to go to the grocery store. You won't be able to travel, as I've already reported on for a while. We've got immunity passports that the airlines are starting to use. And I found an article this morning I shared on my Telegram channel about Florida hotels starting to test out QR codes for people who've been found to be immune or have been recovered. I mean, this is the new normal. And the new normal is leading to another phase of things, which is called the Great Reset. I know many of you have probably started to hear that term, the Great Reset. I'm working on I think, going to be an explosive article. It's going to at least be, one long article, maybe 2 or 3 pieces, depending on how long it comes out to be. But this is going to be the picture that you need to see. The people who are pushing the Great Reset are the same people that were involved in Event 201, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the World Economic Forum, Johns Hopkins University, the United Nations, the CDC, all these people. Now they're taking advantage, and they're calling this the Great Reset. It's time for us to take advantage of the fact that COVID-19 has shown us that all of our systems don't work. So we need a new economically fair and just and equitable society. And it all sounds good if you don't understand how these people operate. But we know that philanthropists, the billionaires, they hide their true intentions behind philanthropy. The Rockefellers have done it for the last 100+ years, and now the Bill Gateses of the world and others are doing this. They hide behind philanthropy when their true intentions are actually much deeper and darker. So if that's new information to you, I invite you to go read my 3-part series on Bill Gates. I invite you to check out our website to learn more about the work we do here. Once again, the website is theconsciousresistance.com. Please go to the website, hit Control-D, bookmark it, and make sure you check my work, guys, because very soon, especially because I'm talking about things like this, channels like mine are going to be gone. They've already deleted several big channels, and I can see they're making their way down. They're getting, I'm sure Corbett Report will be gone soon, unfortunately, and that'll be a huge loss to the truth community. Eventually, they will come for us. I just passed 60,000 subscribers thanks to you guys on YouTube, and we're getting other numbers on Library, on BitChute, and elsewhere. But look, guys, I am never going to give up my work. I will continue to do this. But one day you might wake up and you won't see me on Facebook anymore. You won't see me on YouTube because they are in the process of purging everybody. This is the continuation of the 2018 purge of independent and alternative media. So if you want to save my work, Control-D, theconsciousresistance.com. Visit once a day, visit once a week, whatever you can, because no matter what happens, until they have me locked in a cage or until I'm dead, I will continue to spread the truth as I know it. I will continue to investigate, and I will continue to ask questions. And I can only do so with your help and your support. And I'm not talking about financially. I appreciate that. But more than anything, share this content. If you like it, if it appeals to you, if it connects with you, get it out there and help another mind begin their journey so that we can continue to push the conscious resistance and the awakening of humanity. Until next time, guys, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate all your efforts. My name is Derek Brose. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.
Remember back in mid-May when I reported on a company named Apogee Systems for America? They're the company that was awarded a $138 million contract by the Defense Department and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It was a part of Project Jumpstart and Rapid USA. The aim of these programs is to, quote, dramatically expand U.S. production capacity for domestically manufactured medical-grade injection devices. The contract will support Jumpstart to create a U.S.-based high-speed supply chain for pre-filled syringes beginning later this year by using well-established blow-fill-seal aseptic plastics manufacturing technology suitable for combating the virus, which cannot be named on this channel, when a safe and proven government-subsidized chemical mixture of DNA-altering material, baby parts, heavy metals, and other poisons, think Bill Gates, because I can't say the V word here on this channel, becomes available. Now, this is Jay Walker, the founder of Priceline.com and curator of an aspect of TED Talks called TED Med. He's also the CEO of the Department of Defense injection darling, Apogee. Now check out this strange interview by CBN News and listen to what Walker says about the amount of CV-19 injection vials they plan to produce each month when they're up and running. And pay particular attention as he addresses the RFID technology that may be a part of the Apogee system.
Public health officials warn that when a coronavirus vaccine is ready, the next hurdle is how to get that vaccine out to the public quickly and in massive numbers.
Translation, the government, who of course is only here to help, is being used by big pharma to peddle their government-subsidized chemical out to the masses. They need to make sure everybody gets a dose.
Joining me now is Jay Walker. He's the CEO of Apogee, a company that entered into a $138 million deal with the Trump administration called Project Jumpstart. Welcome, Mr. Walker.
Glad to be here, Lori.
So what is Project Jumpstart?
Well, Project Jumpstart is an emergency and temporary program in the battle against COVID-19.
Did you hear those buzzwords? It's an emergency. We have a battle going on. Of course, against an invisible enemy, which we can't even prove exists. And it's necessary that we win this battle. As William Pitt the Younger said, necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedoms. It's the argument of tyrants. It's the creed of slaves.
It's a public-private partnership between my company, Apogee Systems of America, and the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Defense. And its purpose is to ensure that by year end, we'll have at least 100 million doses ready to inject of a vaccine or therapeutic, assuming one is available.
And now you are going to be making these pre-filled syringes for the vaccines. What's the problem with glass vial systems of manufacturing and delivering vaccines?
Well, there's no problem with glass vials. They work wonderfully, except when you need hundreds of millions of them all at once. The supply chain for glass vials requires not only that you have all of those vials and all the materials that go with it, but it requires that you have extremely specialized filling equipment to fill all those vials. All of that equipment is currently busy. It works on cancer drugs and other life-saving drugs. There is no excess capacity to fill 100 million, 150 million or more with a new vaccine. Therefore, the U.S. government has stepped out and said, we'll need to use another way to make sure that that vaccine can be delivered to people who want it.
Keep in mind that he said to people who want it, implying that you'll have a choice to reject the injection if you want to. But as Gil Bates has already informed us on several occasions, you can reject the big pharma injection, but you won't be able to travel, you won't be able to fly, take public transportation, and maybe down the road, you won't even be able to shop for groceries unless you can produce your vaccination certification.
So how exactly does Apogee work?
Well, if you've ever used an eyedropper where you in your eye take a little squeeze bottle, that technology is called blow, fill, seal. And that is exactly the same technology we're using. There are eyedropper facilities in the U.S., not many, but a few, that we are going to upgrade so they can handle vaccines. Then what will happen is those facilities will make the containers right here that will hold the vaccine. We will add a needle hub to them, and voila, you have a pre-filled syringe that's ready to use.
So where will they be manufactured, and what is significant about that now and going forward?
Well, we haven't announced yet which of the facilities in the U.S. will receive the upgrades. We're in discussions with all of the major U.S. manufacturers, but there are not many that do this on U.S. soil. What's going to happen is we'll choose one or two of those facilities in the next few weeks, and then we will begin to install all kinds of upgraded equipment that will all be approved by the FDA.
And you know when something is FDA approved, it's perfectly safe. You can bet your health and the health of your entire family on a fast-tracked, government-approved drug that has the blessing of Gil Bates. What could possibly go wrong?
Eventually, what we're going to do starting next year is build entire new factories capable of doing up to 330 million doses every month.
Entire new factories? 300 million doses a month? What's the population of America? Oh yeah, that's right, about 330 million. It sure sounds like they're planning on making a dose for every man, woman, and child in this country. And if they run 300 million doses a month, that's 3.6 billion doses a year. Run that for 2 straight years, and you're going to have enough for every person on the planet, just like Bill Gates said.
Well, the areas that we have the deepest expertise in is how you do testing, how you find drugs that will save lives, and how you get a vaccine that making 7 billion of those is going to be an incredible challenge.
Making 7 billion of those,
so that the entire U.S. population can be filled and finished from these brand new factories that we're building on U.S. soil.
How does the optional RFID chip work?
Well, each of these devices that are injection have the capacity to also have a small chip. What that chip does is it has the unique serial number for each dose. It is designed so that there is no counterfeiting. It's designed so that we'll know exactly that the right dose hasn't expired. However, that chip only refers to the dose. There's no personal information, no patient information. It's simply like a barcode, only we know instantaneously where and when that dose has been used. That also helps public health officials know when there are outbreaks, have we vaccinated enough people in those areas? That technology is purely optional, however, and the U.S. government hasn't even decided if they're going to use it.
Yeah, don't worry, it's purely optional. In fact, you'll have the option of whether you want to accept or reject the injection. Of course you'll have options. And this isn't for tracking at all. There's no way they're going to implement ID 2020 by way of forced injection. Don't worry about it. Get that out of your pretty little head.
How quickly can you manufacture the vaccines, and what's your long-term goal?
Well, we don't make vaccines, Lori. Drug companies make the vaccines. They then ship them to us for the packaging. So our long-term goal is to make sure that no matter what vaccine wins or what vaccines and what therapeutics are available, America can fill and finish in these pre-filled syringes as many of the drugs as we need for U.S. citizens and eventually to have excess to export worldwide.
U.S. citizens and worldwide.
Our goal is to make sure that on American soil, we have everything we need to protect America.
When do you think you might start filling these with the vaccine?
Well, the president has said that that vaccine will be ready this year. So if that vaccine shows up at our door, we're going to be ready to fill it as soon as it does.
I don't know about you guys, but the entire interview seems scripted and extremely controlled. But this guy is the CEO of Apiject, and Apiject does hold the DoD contract to fast-track Gil Bates' concoction and ship it out to the masses.
Scamdemic update coming very recently. Red flags soar as Big Pharma. No surprise. They've had this for some, 34 years, I believe, so they're going to continue to have it moving forward. Big Pharma will be exempt for vaccine liability claims. AstraZeneca has been granted protection from future product liability claims related to its COVID-19 vaccine, hopeful by most of the countries with which it has struck supply agreements. It's a tough sentence there, but that's basically a senior executive of AstraZeneca going to, of course, the important news media of the possibly Rothschild-controlled Reuters. The thing is, they won't tell you which countries they've made all these deals with. 25 companies to test their vaccine candidates on humans, getting ready to immunize hundreds of millions of people once the products are shown to work. The question of who pays for any claims for damages in case they don't work so well. Side effects, tricky point in supply negotiations. This is a unique situation where we as a company simply cannot take the risk if in 4 years the vaccine is showing side effects, says Ruud Dauber, a member of Astra's senior executive team. Again, talking straight to Reuters. EU officials told Reuters this week product liability was among contentious points in European efforts to secure supply deals for potential COVID-19 vaccines from Pfizer, Sanofi, and Johnson & Johnson. To put it plainly, like I saw it on the tweets, AstraZeneca, big pharma company that of course have covered up study results of their damaging products in the past, they're going to be exempt from their possible damaging products in the future. James, I wish I could say any of this was a surprise. It's more of the same, and it's again, we have these moments in this medical martial law where it just the clarity of it all hits, and it's pretty sad.
Right. You're right. In some ways, that's the point of a story like this. I know what this story is about and what it means. And I know you know what this story is about and what it means. And I know that the vast majority of our regular audience understands this story and what it means. But in the interest then of taking this information and trying to use it to wake people up who aren't awake yet or are still influenced by the Reddit trendies and social media bots that have convinced them that anyone who dares question the vaccine manufacturers is a crazy conspiracy theorist. How do we use a story like this? And one way that you might want to introduce this to one of your normie friends would be to say, hey, did you hear the oil companies have just been given complete carte blanche immunity for any environmental damage that their products cause in the future? That's crazy. Isn't that outrageous? Doesn't that make you angry? Oh, wait, did I say oil companies, environmental damage? Sorry, I meant vaccine manufacturers and health damage. I always get those confused, but since it's vaccine manufacturers, that's perfectly okay, right? And anyone who is rational and being honest with themselves, which admittedly is a smaller and smaller percentage of the population these days, but anyone with two brain cells to rub together will be able to see that, yes, they're holding double standards. There is a cognitive dissonance. Yes, I understand corporate malfeasance, and I'm very distrustful of the corporate, profit motive and all of this in these areas, but in this area, they're totally fine. And anyone who questions them is a conspiracy theorist. Anyone who won't look at that cognitive dissonance and have a moment of realization is not being honest with themselves and is frankly not worth your time trying to intervene any further. So I think that's one way we can take a story like this and introduce it a little bit creatively to the normies in your life to hopefully get them to see the bigger picture here.
That's pretty fantastic. Yeah, I think I've joked recently just in the just nutball coronavirus era, having fun with stories that seem like satire, but they're real, and stories that seem real that turn out to be satire. It's all sort of, you could probably easily text a normie friend with that. And again, it's a little trolly, but I think that's why memes work, James. We'll include one other related, which hopefully folks, after they maybe get the little glint of wondering what's going on, wonder, hey, this of course didn't start last week. This has deeper roots. And just some of those roots go back to what we've talked about here before, Dark Winter. That would be, of course, those series of essentially pharma terror drills in the months leading up to 9/11. All roads lead to Dark Winter. Whitney Webb has a fantastic piece posted a couple of months ago, or maybe several weeks back, but it's basically Fort Detrick, Gilead, 9/11, anthrax attacks. It's all the folks involved in all of that back yet again. What a surprise.
All right. Welcome to the Conscious Resistance Network. My name is Derek Bros, and today we are going to be showing you how the health officials, the governments, they are prepared and preparing for how to convince you to take the COVID-19 vaccine. We're going to get into that and so much more, guys. I've got about 7 or 8 links to go over. This is all going to be very vital, important information that you need to know in what we are dealing with, what I have termed the vaccine. Well, I don't want to take credit for it. Actually, the first place I heard it was the New York Times. But what the New York Times, the mainstream, and others are calling a vaccine information war. And make no doubt about it, we are in an information war, but we have seemed to have switched gears now and moved into the vaccine information war. This is what the mainstream is calling it, as they are preparing and coming up with new ways how to convince you and your family to take the vaccine, to not worry about the potential for harm, to not worry about the fact that the companies making the vaccines have indemnity and will be protected from any sort of wrongdoing if you're injured. They don't want you to worry about those things. Instead, the goal is, how do we convince the public that this is all okay and that everything is just fine? We're going to talk about that and so much more. But first, I want to remind you guys to bookmark my website, theconsciousresistance.com, which is the home for all of my content. This is where you can find and download all of my books for free. You can you can watch for free all of our documentaries. You can find podcasts and so much more. Also, guys, we have this music submission tab. I kind of forgot about this. And the other day I realized I have an inbox full of music submissions from like the past year. So thank you to everybody who sends me music submissions. I will be playing these as part of Freethinker Radio. And maybe even we'll just do like a music hour or something sometime so we can share conscious music of all kinds. But be sure to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com. Follow us on all of our alternative social media platforms. I just went over this video in the video before about how important it is to sign up for our email newsletter. Right here, you can sign up and to follow us elsewhere, because we likely will be deleted soon. I'm not saying that because I want to. I'm just accepting the current paradigm and the current environment and how likely that might be. So you want to follow us before we disappear. And as I mentioned, we are in the middle of a vaccine information war. I wrote this article for The Last American Vagabond back in May. Which side of the vaccine information war are you on? Again, the New York Times put out an article called Get Ready for a Vaccine Information War. And then after that, we had an article from Forbes magazine saying it's going to get ugly. The fight for COVID-19 vaccine is going to get ugly. They're preparing us for this thought that, people are going to push back. And it's because they're accepting the reality. I mean, the reality is that there are so many people, and I'm sure you guys have seen it, so many people who are at the very least skeptical of the vaccine. And these are people who are self-identified pro-vaxxers who say that because of the rush nature of the vaccine, because of the admitted already high levels of adverse reactions, that they are not likely to take it. According to two different polls, we had 33% of people saying they wouldn't take the vaccine and as high as 51% people saying they wouldn't take a vaccine. So that's a problem for people like Bill Gates and others who say we need 70 to 80% of the people to take the vaccine, or Bill Gates who said we need to vaccinate 7 billion people on the planet. So how do you do that? How do you think about this in a way that is scientific? And if you know anything about these people, you know that they are scientific in the way they operated. They didn't just randomly think of Event 201 and study the situation just for their own, just to have some fun. They did so because they want to understand how humans will respond, because they study our psychology. This is what the Predator class does. The New England Journal of Medicine released this study June 26, 2020, guys, so just a little bit over a month ago. And it's called Perspective, Ensuring Uptake of Vaccines Against SARS-CoV-2. We're going to go over this and another recent story that some of you may have heard about. I don't think many people saw this one. But what I think is incredibly important about this study is that it outlines 6 substantive criteria that should be met before a state imposes a SARS-CoV-2 vaccine mandate. So they're basically outlining that if you're a government and you plan to impose a vaccine mandate for coronavirus, you should follow these 6 steps. So the first is the existence of evidence that COVID-19 is inadequately controlled in the state by other measures such as contact tracing, testing, isolation, and quarantine. And as indicated by sustained troubling trends in new cases, hospitalizations, or deaths. So I kind of think that's interesting. They're basically saying, like, if it's out of control and testing, contact tracing, isolation, and quarantine aren't working, and if you have new cases, hospitalizations, or deaths, so they're meeting all criteria. Maybe if you got a lot of deaths, then it's out of control. If you got a lot of hospitalizations, it's out of control. If you got new cases, it's out of control. But as my longtime listeners will know, there's definitely problems with the way that they're measuring cases, the tests themselves. And so that's already, I think, a problematic criteria from the beginning. And it says principles of public health law and ethics require that interventions that impinge on autonomy be reasonable and necessary. Therefore, COVID-19 must present an ongoing threat. By the time a vaccine is available, more will be known about natural immunity in the population, the consequences of relaxing community mitigation measures, and the feasibility of scaling up test and trace strategies. There should be a reasonable indication as to whether further measures are needed. So I'm just going to go ahead and read their 6 criteria. We're going to spend a few moments on this, and then we're going to get into another important study. But again, this is coming from the New England Journal of Medicine, Ensuring Uptakes of Vaccines Against SARS-CoV-2. And they're calling for 6 criteria that a state should follow in order for them to issue a mandate. And the first one, I think, is just kind of establishing that they want the public, whether real or imagined, to be told that that it's not adequately contained, that they have been unable to contain COVID or whatever the situation may be. And thus, we need to proceed to the next step. The next step is the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices has recommended vaccination for the groups for which a mandate is being considered. So in that case, what they're talking about here is that the second criteria is that the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, which I've never heard of, after reviewing the safety and efficacy evidence, has recommended vaccination for persons who would be covered by a mandate. Currently available evidence suggests that elderly health professionals working in high-risk situations or working with high-risk patients and persons with certain underlying medical conditions should be or may be a high priority for the group's consideration. And persons with blah, blah. So it's basically saying that once this group, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, has issued the recommendation, then as a vaccine nears approval, they should review it and then provide updated evidence and update recommendations. And only the recommended groups should be considered for a vaccine mandate, though health officials encourage voluntary uptake using means such as public education campaigns and free vaccines. So the second criteria, they're saying that the state should mandate it after this group reviews the vaccines and the evidence and makes a recommendation and says, hey, we believe this group of people, young people, old people, black people, white people, whatever, need to get a vaccine. And then this, according to this paper, it would then be justified for the government to issue a mandate based on that advisory. Obviously, I don't agree with that. I don't even know who the heck the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices is. I definitely never voted for them. I doubt anybody has heard of them. The average person has heard of them. And so I know they didn't vote for them to give them the ability to make these decisions. Some would argue, no, we vote for the people, and then the people listen to the experts, and the experts are the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. But offhand, I would say, we should be skeptical of who they are and what their purposes are. And even if you thought that they were the most kind, most intelligent people in the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, I still would not support there being some sort of forced mandate. Let them make a recommendation. That's fine. And the people who give it weight will do what they say. And the people who don't think it's worth, two shits will ignore it. But we don't need the government to be enforcing it. Their third criteria says the supply of vaccine is sufficient to cover the population's groups for which a mandate is being considered. So if you have sufficient vaccines to cover whatever recommendations they make, then, go ahead and do it. Available. And so the other criteria is that the available evidence about the safety and the efficacy of the vaccine has been transparently communicated. So that's their fourth step. If you tell the people what, what their, potential harm is, then I guess you're good. So that's what they say here is there's been transparent communication of the best available evidence of safety and efficacy, particularly given the possibility that the evidence underlying the FDA approval of SARS-CoV vaccines may be more modest than usual. That's a nice way of saying they might not take as much time or do as much research as they typically would do in a normal vaccine trial. And considering that, policymakers and the public will need to understand the limits of what is known. Public's trust has already been compromised by federal officials' endorsement of hydroxychloroquine, which, by the way, studies are finding is effective, and other studies say it's not effective. But it's just funny how they throw that in there. I'm sure this is not political at all. The fifth criteria, the state has created infrastructure to provide access to vaccination without financial or logistic barriers, compensation to workers who have adverse effects from a required vaccine, and real-time surveillance of vaccine side effects. Now, this is really interesting. So, provide support mechanisms for people who are required to take the vaccine. Lessons from past vaccine campaigns suggest that a generous compensation program for people who have serious vaccine side effects should be a centerpiece of these efforts. A federal compensation fund like the Smallpox Vaccine Injury Compensation Program is one attractive model, although identifying compensable injuries may be challenging with a novel vaccine. States will also have to create distribution systems to provide the vaccine to high priority groups with near zero financial and logistical barriers. For example, bringing free vaccines to points of care, pharmacy, and work sites. And guys, I covered this in my recent video, Don't Tell the Anti-Vaxxers About This Study, how there's increased effort to use community programs and to get into churches and to get into the places that people trust and to give away masks for free and to give away vaccines for free. That's how they think they can build trust within communities and get people to submit. Equally critical is to have a safety assessment plan in place before vaccines are widely distributed. So look, that's 2 times in this document in this New England Journal of Medicine where they admit that there are potential for vaccines and that people need to be made aware of that, and maybe people need to be compensated for that. The final criteria says, in a time-limited evaluation, voluntary uptake of the vaccine among high-priority groups has fallen short of the level required to prevent epidemic spread. So what that means is that if people are not voluntarily taking it after a certain amount of time and there's a spike, then they basically need to make it enforceable. So it says the last criteria is the vaccine mandates are imposed only after a time-limited trial of a voluntary vaccine provision has proved unsuccessful. Guys, this is what they're going to do. They're going to say first people are going to be rushing. Your mom, your grandma, your neighbor, they're all going to be rushing to go get this vaccine. Some people are going to get injured probably, and they'll downplay that or call it crazy conspiracy, or we'll all just be off YouTube and Facebook and won't be able to tell anybody about it. And then once a certain amount of time passes, they're going to say, here comes another spike. Despite the vaccine, the 1s and the 2s and the third dose, it's not doing anything. You know why? Because your neighbor is not getting the vaccine. So enough time has passed, and now we must go beyond voluntary vaccine provisions. Principles of public health ethics support trying less burdensome policies before moving to more burdensome ones whenever possible. In this case, the cost of a failed voluntary scheme are sufficiently high that the attempt should be limited to a matter of weeks. States should implement a system for measuring vaccine uptake within each high priority group against a set of coverage targets. So basically, follow a certain high priority group, set targets, and see if you meet them. If you don't meet them, after doing the economic and logistic supports, making them free, getting out into the community, well, then it might be time to mandate it. And right here they write, if the proposed trigger criteria were met, what might a vaccination mandate look like? Because the constitutional power to protect public health rests primarily with the state, each state will need to adopt its own legislation. Proposed legislation should be supported by attestations from the state health officer, the ACIP, or another expert committee that all trigger criteria have been met. Targeted SARS-CoV-2 vaccine mandate policies may also be appropriate in certain federal contexts, including high-risk groups in active duty military environments, veterans affairs facilities, federal prisons, and immigration detention centers. Although state vaccine mandates are usually tied to school and daycare entry, that approach is not appropriate for SARS-CoV-2 because children won't be a high priority group, they claim right here. In addition, state mandates should not be structured as compulsory vaccination. Instead, so this is funny. It says it should not be structured as compulsory absolute requirements. Instead, non-compliance should incur a penalty. Nevertheless, because of the infectiousness and dangerousness of the virus, relatively substantive penalties could be justified, including employment suspension or stay-at-home orders for persons in designated high-priority groups who refuse vaccines. Do you guys hear this? This is not a freaking conspiracy. This is published in the New England Journal of Medicine, saying that if these different criteria are reached, that not only should you be penalized, which, I mean, that's basically the same thing as a compulsory vaccine, because if they penalize you $250 a day or something like that, and you can't afford that, well, you're going to submit. So it's social engineering. They might not be saying you have to do it, but they're basically, putting you between a rock and a hard place and an even harder place, and people feel like they have no options. But then you go on even further, and they suggest suspending people from employment and stay-at-home orders for persons in designated high-priority groups if you refuse it. And it says neither fines nor criminal penalties should be used. However, fines disadvantage the poor and criminal penalties invite challenges on procedural due process grounds. And see, that's interesting. They're like, well, we don't want to do penalties because then people might challenge this in court and challenge whether we have the due process, whether they've been given due process to do this, whether it's constitutional. And we don't want that to happen. Both are bad public health policy for COVID-19 because they may stroke distrust without improving uptake. So yeah, this study, I will link this to you guys below. Actually, it's already been linked. If you go to theconsciousresistance.com, all the links are already posted on the front page of the website. You can see that. But has anybody seen that one? I will just link it in the video for everybody. Have you guys heard of this one prior? I know that there's another one going around right now that is been from Yale that some of you have seen, but that one I have seen less people talking about. I haven't seen anybody really speaking on that. But yeah, I mean, think about this. They're saying that they can suspend you from your work, or that the suggestion from these scientists in the New England Journal of Medicine is that they should suspend you from work, that they should keep you from going to school. Don't do fines or penalties because that'll create distrust. And maybe we're going to get a legal challenge that we can't beat. But I mean, the point is that this is the direction we're going, guys. This is how, as the video is titled, how they're going to convince you to take the COVID-19 vaccine. They're trying to study it. They're trying to figure out, okay, here's the 6 criteria. But let's go to the next story now as we start to wrap this up. Thank you again, guys, for everybody who's tuned in. This is Derek Bros of the Conscious Resistance Network. If you haven't yet, please do hit the like button, subscribe, thumbs up, follow, all that good stuff, and make sure you guys can keep up with our content. Subscribe to our newsletter for sure. This one right here is on clinicaltrials.gov from the NIH, the U.S. National Library of Medicine, and it was sponsored by Yale University. And I think it came out, let me see if I got a date here. First posted July 7th, last update July 21st, and it is completed, a completed study. COVID-19 vaccine messaging, part 1. Brief summary. This study tests different messaging about vaccinating against COVID-19 once the vaccine becomes available. Participants are randomized of 12 arms with one control arm and one baseline arm. We will compare the reported willingness to get a COVID-19 vaccine at 3 and 6 months of it becoming available between the 10 intervention arms to the 2 control arms. Study participants are recruited online by Lucid, which matches census-based sampling and online recruitment. So they go on here and they describe the different types of messaging that they're trying to give people, and you can see they have different names for them. Like this one's control message based. So the control message is that a passage on the costs and benefits of bird feeding. Baseline message. It says a message about the effectiveness and safety of vaccine. Personal freedom message. It's a message about how COVID-19 is limiting people's personal freedom, and by working together to get enough people vaccinated, society can preserve its personal freedom. Isn't that funny how they're like actually trying to use health freedom, medical freedom as a way to convince people to get the vaccine? They're saying like, hey, COVID-19 is very limiting to our freedoms. We can't go outside. They want to shut this down. So you know what? Maybe if we go ahead and just get this vaccine, we can preserve that freedom. I have seen some libertarians argue that, interestingly enough. Economic freedom, which is a message about how COVID-19 is limiting people's economic freedom, and by working together to get enough people vaccinated, society can preserve its economic freedom. Self-interest message is a message that COVID-19 presents a real danger to one's health, and even if one is young and healthy, getting vaccinated against COVID-19 is the best way to prevent oneself from getting sick. Community interest message says that it talks about the health of loved ones, and said the more people who get vaccinated, the lower the risk the one is to the one's loved ones who will get sick. Society must work together and all get vaccinated. Economic benefit message is a message about how COVID-19 is wreaking havoc on the economy, and the only way to strengthen the economy is to work together. Guilt message. Here we go, bringing the guilt. It's about the danger of the COVID-19 presents to health of one's family. The best way to protect them is getting vaccinated, and society must work together to get people vaccinated. Then it asked the participant to imagine the guilt they will feel if they don't get vaccinated and spread the disease. Think about that, guys. Think about how guilty you're going to feel. Embarrassment message. The best message, it says, is that the danger to COVID-19 presents to one's family and community. The best way to protect them is by getting vaccinated and making sure that enough people get vaccinated. Then it asks participants to imagine the embarrassment they will feel if they don't get vaccinated and spread the message. Are you embarrassed yet? Anger message, and basically says, again, same sort of setup, and then it asks the participant to imagine that what they will feel, the anger they will feel if they don't get vaccinated and spread the disease. Are you mad yet? Are you freaking mad? Trust in science message. The message is about how getting vaccinated against COVID-19 is the most effective way of protecting one's community. Vaccination is backed by science, after all, and if one doesn't get vaccinated, that means one doesn't understand how infections are spread, or one who ignores science. Ha, anti-science denier. Not bravery message. This is message which describes how firefighters, doctors, and frontline medical workers are brave. And those who choose not to get vaccinated against COVID-19, they're not brave. Not like those great medical work. I mean, guys, this is pretty crazy. Wow. So this is funded by Yale. All right. This is a funded by Yale. So they want to embarrass you. They want to tell you you're not brave, tell you you're an anti-science denier. They want you to imagine the anger, the embarrassment, the guilt that you will feel. I mean, this is all collectivism. This is all about trying to get people, again, to shame individuals and to make people think that, thinking for yourself is a problem. And instead, you got to think about the greater collective. So let's look at the final conclusions here of this study and see what they came to find. Outcome measures, primary outcome measures. And number one, intention to get COVID-19 vaccine. This is a self-reported measure immediately after the intervention message of the likelihood of getting a COVID-19 vaccination within 3 to 6 months. During analysis, responses among those assigned to different intervention messages will be compared to those in the control group. Vaccine confidence scale, the persuade others item, fear of those who have not been vaccinated, social judgment of those who do not vaccinate. So they're talking about, basically measuring whether or not you're likely to shame somebody else, whether or not you're to trust them. I found this article from Collective Evolution, kind of going over some of the results. I'll include that as well. But this is the point, guys, is that they're basically like talking about shaming people. They're talking about trying to make you feel guilty, and they want you to imagine the guilt, the anger, the embarrassment that you'll feel if you don't take the vaccine. And we just covered the previous study from the New England Journal of Medicine, 6 different things, criteria that they think need to be met before a mandatory vaccination thing happens. And here's another study talking about the messaging. How can we convince people that it's safe? You can shame them. You can call them anti-science. You can do things of that sort. And they wonder why people are asking questions and why people are concerned. Could it be things like this? Recently announced that the vaccine distribution will be joint venture between the CDC and the Pentagon, aka the Department of Defense, aka formerly known as the Department of War, aka the people who bomb and kill people all around the world, the military. They're going to partner with the CDC, these two agencies that we can trust, to distribute vaccines all around the country as part of Operation Warp Speed. Those of you who still have faith in Trump, I think you need to rethink that very quickly as this situation accelerates forward. Now, as we segue from the main story, which we just covered, two studies, one from the New England Journal of Medicine, one that's posted on the National Library of Medicine from Yale University, both of these discussing requirements and messaging and how to convince people and what are the steps we need to take before we initiate a mandatory vaccination. And none of these things acknowledge in any realistic way why people are asking questions. Guys, when I ran for mayor of Houston last year, 2019, one of the things I realized is that even if you're just asking questions about vaccines, you get labeled anti-vaxxer. And I've never had anybody clearly define to me what this anti-vaxxer term is, because there's people like myself who believe in bodily autonomy and freedom of choice and medical and health freedom. And there are people who are against all vaccines. There are people who want to change the vaccine schedule. There are people who are for vaccines but just believe in choice. And all of those people get lumped in as anti-vaxxers for asking these kinds of questions. So it's just a smear term, just like conspiracy theorists and all these others are. But when I was running for mayor, I realized that we're already in a dangerous place. This is well before COVID-19. I realized that even when I just told people, hey, I think that, people own their body and that you shouldn't be able to force them to take a vaccine if you think they need it, you shouldn't be able to force. The government shouldn't be able to use that force on them. Because all I said as a mayoral candidate was, I will never enforce in the city of Houston, that we're going to have vaccines. I wasn't trying to win. It was more to try to get the message out there. And people were pushing back already then pre-COVID. And now here we are in the COVID days. And you better believe people are for mandatory vaccinations. And now we have the military getting ready to start distributing this with the CDC. I don't know if that means they're going to come into your house, the military is going to round you up and force a vaccine on you. I know that's the image that pops in people's heads sometimes, but I do know that is, people talk about optics. That's not good optics to have the military running around there with the CDC helping distribute this. And this is absolutely psychological warfare. This is them trying to induce trauma-based mind control on us by constantly having people in a state of fear and anxiety. But let's just look for 2 seconds at one example of why people are concerned about this vaccine. Is it crazy to worry about the safety of this vaccine when we have reports like this just 5 days ago? AstraZeneca, one of the vaccine companies, to be exempt from coronavirus vaccine liability claim in most countries. AstraZeneca has been granted protection from future product liability claims related to its COVID-19 vaccine, hopeful by most of countries with which it has struck supply agreements, a senior executive told Reuters. With 25 companies testing their vaccine candidates on humans and getting ready to immunize hundreds of millions of people once the products are shown to work, the question of who pays for any claims for damages in case of side effects has been a tricky point in supply negotiations. That's all it is, guys. The health of your family and your kids and your friends, it's just a tricky point in supply negotiations. It's not really like, hey, people are going to get hurt. People could get injured. People might die. This is just a tricky point in supply negotiations. But Ruud Dauber, a member of AstraZeneca's senior executive team, told Reuters, quote, "This is a unique situation where we as a company simply cannot take the risk if in 4 years the vaccine is showing side effects. In the contracts we have in place, we're asking for indemnification. For most countries, it is acceptable to take that risk on their shoulders because it is in the national interest." He would not name which countries he was talking about. Now, indemnity, you guys might have heard this term in recent months, to indemnify. It's basically just giving these companies immunity. We can go back as far as April, and it was being reported then, Big Pharma throws out old models in the race to the COVID-19 vaccine. And I'll just show you right here. Indemnify. First, do no harm. How companies indemnify themselves against potential claims of harm from any novel vaccine might be a new consideration for pharma. And so they're talking about this way back then. And then we have this clip here from Bill Gates back in April, where he also says that the companies need to be indemnified, that they need to be protected against potential claims against them. So think about that. They're rushing this vaccine at a speed before we've never seen. It's called Operation Warp Speed. You've got people like Bill Gates and all these other folks involved. Companies like AstraZeneca and other corporations are applying for indemnity. And Bill Gates here is saying, yes, these companies need to be protected. Check this out real quick. So in that long little word salad he just said there is some risk and need for indemnification. They want these companies to be protected. And I guess, look, from a business standpoint, I get that somebody could try to rationalize this. Like, hey, like, you want us to spend billions of dollars producing these vaccines, and then you want us to rush them, and then you also want us to be open for liability in the event that somebody's harmed? Like, hell no, that's a stupid business decision. We're not doing that. Like, okay, I can play that game for a moment, but that also completely ignores the fact that these vaccines are being taxpayer funded, that your tax dollars in the United States and elsewhere around the world, your tax dollars are going into the World Health Organization, or they're going into the Global Vaccine Alliance, both of which are funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And then the US is buying these vaccines, and they're saying they're doing it for cheap. But the point is, they're buying the vaccines from the corporations that are profiting off of this while getting taxpayer subsidies from the governments. So they're getting subsidies. These people like the head of Operation Warp Speed, Moncef Slaoui, who was appointed by Donald Trump, they own millions of stock in these companies. So, I mean, there's just so much going on. And look at this, April 2018, Bill Gates talking about indemnification way back then. He's like, we need indemnification and manufacturing agreements in place with pharmaceutical companies. This was when he was saying the next epidemic is coming in 2018. And he's talking about then. You go back to 2015 and Bill Gates as well. He says one of these hard questions is, should and can they indemnify whoever is producing the drug to protect them from lawsuits? My point here is that this discussion has been going on for quite some time. You might have just woken up to this, my friends, but they have been thinking about this for quite some time. And, we're basically at the point now where if you question what's going on, if you challenge these systems, you are going to be shamed. You're going to be, outcasted. You're going to be called a science denier. We've just gone over two different studies, one from Yale University, published on the National Library of Medicine, the other from the New England Journal of Medicine. You can find these both on the front page of theconsciousresistance.com under the post, "Here's how they will convince you to take the COVID vaccine." And we can see the strategy. This is coming, guys. This is coming. I'm not a fear monger, okay? I don't like to get all hyped up and act like Alex Jones, like, guys, get ready. But guys, get ready, because the shit's going down, and I don't know when it's going to happen, but I do know that according to the U.S. government, they're saying they're going to have the first 100 million doses of this vaccine in October. This is August 4th, September, October. That's 2 months away. And then they're saying another 100 million doses by December, and then another 100 million doses by January. Maybe that's just a bunch of bullshit. Them saying that just before the election to try to look like they're doing something. But that's what they're talking about. So let's say there's 6 months to a year before this vaccine rolls around. We already see, like the city of Houston where I'm at, $250 citations for not wearing a mask in public. In public now. They're enforcing this. And do you think they would hesitate to do the same thing if you're traveling around without vaccine proof or without, any of this stuff going on? Like, they're going to use this to control you in whatever way they can, because COVID-19 or not, whether this situation happened or not, this has been in the works for some time. It's called technocracy. It's called the technocratic state. I wrote a book and I released it for free in February. It's called How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. Go visit theconsciousresistance.com, go to the books tab, download the book for free, and swallow it and absorb it and take the information into your mind, please, because it is highly relevant right now. You need to start asking yourself, how can you get food if you don't want to submit to masks? How can you get food if you don't want to submit to vaccine mandates? Do you have your own food? Do you have some supplies? Do you have a community that you're a part of? Have you started a freedom cell? Are you doing anything proactive other than just sitting there shaking in your boots and waiting for them to show up at your house with hazmat suits and cops with guns and, put an ankle monitor on you. That's not fake news. That happened already here in Arkansas, in the United States of America. In the United States of America, they've been tracking people's license plate if they're coming from the wrong place, and checkpoints. All these things have happened since February. This is the new normal, and the new normal is leading to the Great Reset. My next video will be focused on the Great Reset. It's going to be a deep dive into the Great Reset. If you haven't read my article about it, go to theconsciousresistance.com, go to The Last American Vagabond, and you can see the article there, COVID-19, the Great Reset, and the new normal. If you want to understand what this is all about and where we're going to, please check this out and educate yourself, guys. Please, 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 please. I don't sit here and ramble and talk for half an hour just to hear my own voice. I do this because this information is important. And as I said in the last video, this information might not be there forever. We're under the threat of being taken down. I don't monetize my channel, so I don't care about getting YouTube and Google money, but I would like to keep broadcasting to you guys via Facebook, YouTube, Float, etc. But they apparently don't want me to be there. So until they delete me, I will be broadcasting. But rest assured, I'm also broadcasting on other platforms that are not deleting my videos, that are not censoring my comments, and that are not taking down my content. If you want to find me, you can find all that information on the front page of theconsciousresistance.com. You can join my Telegram channel. You can sign up for my text list. You can sign up for our newsletter. Please take the time to do this and share this video if you found this content valuable. I appreciate everyone who continues to support my work. If you want to, please contribute to our crowdfunding campaign for our next documentary, The Pyramid of Power. You can find all of that at theconsciousresistance.com. That is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for your support, for listening to my rants, and for seeing that it's up to us to do something. If you care about your family, if you care about the coming generations, if you can get outside of that bubble that is ego and that it is us in this present moment, and think of the future generations and think of what it's going to be like for them to grow up in a world where masks everywhere is normal, where having to get a vaccine just to travel is normal. Think of the people that are coming, and think of how much easier or more difficult life is going to be based on your action or your inaction. And then I think you'll find the answers of what you should do. Thank you guys so much for listening. Until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free, my friends. Peace.